very pleased to have as my guest today our state representative from the 11th District, Julie Plawecki. So, State Representative, thank you for being on my program today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be here, Mayor.
So, how long now have you been a state representative?
I have been in office 1 year and 2 months.
Have you gotten used to driving back and forth to Lansing?
You know, I have. It was really hard the first couple of months, particularly because it was January and the weather was horrible last year. And it was just, I was tired. After 3 days of driving every week for a couple of months, I was tired. So I started staying 1 day a week, which cut down on the driving, and it cut down on the white knuckle driving on those days when the weather was really bad. And then once the weather got better and I was adjusted to the drive, I didn't stay so much anymore. So I have gotten used to it. I don't think I would want to do it 5 days a week. 3 is plenty.
Yeah, and I had, when I was leaving, I had it perfect to within 90 seconds from my driveway to the parking spot. So sometimes getting a traffic light or two, or depending on if somebody else was getting into the parking lot, but had it pretty close, knew exactly how to do it. But that I always thought was one of the bad sides. And then I think people who are not familiar with it would be surprised, but when you're up there, the lunches, it's not unusual to get invited to 2-3 lunches a day, a couple dinners, and you really can't eat that much, although the layout, the buffets, and the food they put out is fantastic.
Well, and they warned us right from the start about the freshman 15 because of all the meals that you get, that you are privy to. And you get invited to, and every stakeholder wants to have a luncheon, and they want you to be there. And you know, you hate to say no, and so I put on about 7 pounds.
Oh, it doesn't show, but that is very easy to do simply because, but it's also a time grabber because you have to make sure you're there for your sessions, and you don't want to miss a roll call. But it's just like it seemed to be standard. I always said that if you could live on just like during the week, because there's nothing on the weekends. You go up there and it's just nothing.
Yeah.
But
you know, those meals are important because those are the times when you get to talk to people, talk to stakeholders, talk to those who are interested in certain bills that you have. And often, again, that's the only time you get to talk to them because you're in session or you're in committee, and so you nosh while you're talking to them.
I agree. And the other thing, it gave me a great opportunity to talk to people on the other side of the aisle.
Yes, absolutely.
And that was in an informal session, and sometimes you could start to put together some of those coalitions that you need in order to get legislation passed.
Yeah, so true.
So which committees are you on?
I'm on 2 committees. I'm on the Energy Committee, which was very active right from the time that I started because they were rewriting the energy policy because it was set to expire at the end of 2015, although now it will carry on because we did not get anything passed. But we had committee meeting every week, 1 or 2 days. We actually met for an entire day because there were so many people that wanted to testify, because they have to decide, do they want to keep the same renewable portfolio standard requiring utilities to meet 10% by the end of 2015. There's a choice piece in there. The utilities would prefer to have total regulation where everybody would have to purchase their energy from them. But right now it's at 90%. They're getting 90% of the customers, and the other 10% go to choice companies, so they can choose who they get their electricity from. And so that piece was out there trying to decide, do we want to leave the 10%? Do we want to expand it? Do we want to go back to total regulation? So that's been really big. Nothing has been passed. It went through committee. It got passed out of committee, but there were not enough votes on the House floor to pass the bills. So those are kind of at a standstill right now. The Senate is still working on theirs. And then I'm also on the Natural Resources Committee.
Okay.
And so we've had some interesting bills come through there. There was a bill on microbeads, which didn't end up getting voted out, but that came through the U.S. House instead. There was a bill recently on net pen aquaculture, because they want to set up, I don't know if you're familiar with that, they want to set up these net pens in the Great Lakes. So it sounds like, oh yeah, we can expand on our fishing industry or whatnot. But unfortunately, all the effluent from the fish
Oh, yes,
are staying in the Great Lakes.
I've heard of that.
So it makes it cheaper for those who have those businesses because they don't have to worry about cleaning out the tank. It can just get washed away, but that has a lot of issues behind it. And then there's a problem with diseases. If these fish in this pen have diseases, they can spread it to the fish that are in there. So it becomes a case of, do we want to expand this and risk the fishing industry? And we had testimony from some of the ship captains, so to speak, or the boat captains who take people out on tours and they go fishing, and it's a very lucrative business for them. So do we want to risk that by having this net pen aquaculture in there, which can actually be done in a closed loop system in a building? I mean, they're doing it in Detroit.
Sure.
I toured this place in Detroit, and it's actually called aquaponics. So they have tilapia fish in these huge tanks, and they use the water as fertilizer for the plants that are upstairs that they are growing. So they sell the little plants to the restaurants, and they sell the tilapia to restaurants. And it's totally enclosed. So they take care of all the effluent themselves. So it's a great system.
That's interesting. It reminds me of two things. One is that when I was in the legislature, one thing that was extremely critical, but I found out that I think it's Aquafina, takes a lot of water out of the Jackson area. There's some springs, and I was told that that is the cleanest, freshest water. And they were but they're pumping like gallons and gallons of it, putting it in a bottle. Requires very little purification, and they're almost can grab it right out of the spring, stick it in a bottle, and sell it. It's that clean.
Good to go, sure.
But the effects on the aqua of the state, and particularly around the Jackson area. So that was one item that hopefully got resolved after I left. I didn't really follow it, but I found it surprising that our water was that pure in this particular state in the Great Lakes.
Isn't that nice to know, though?
Yeah, if you want fresh water, Jackson, Michigan, there are probably other places, but and they felt that since they bought the land, that the water underneath was considered like a mineral, so that they could just extract. And the legislation was to put a cap on that because they could drain the whole aqua.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. Because just because you buy the land doesn't mean you get to use all the groundwater. And that's the problem with the fracking industry right now, if I can bring that up. Because they've been doing fracking for many, many years, dozens of years in Michigan, but it was just the vertical fracking where you dig a well and pull out whatever resource you're looking for, typically oil and gas. And so now they're doing the horizontal high volume fracking where you go down and then you make a 90-degree turn and you're cracking up the rocks down there to release the natural gas. But it takes so much water to do that, like 100,000 gallons of water at one sitting. And so what are we doing to our water supply? Because that water gets contaminated and they can't reuse it, so they have to put that into waste injection wells. So that water's gone. Can never get that back. And so that's a huge issue, that kind of fracking.
The other thing that I find interesting, because somebody's running commercials, and there's a woman that says, oh, my family has studied this, and there's nothing wrong with it. But there has to be some kind of correlation to the number of earthquakes that Oklahoma and that area is, and also I think western Pennsylvania, which these are areas that had very few earthquakes, and then this fracking industry comes in, and they're not 6-7 point earthquakes, but they're in the 3 range. And the fact is, what are we doing underneath there that
right. Well, I mean, you're disturbing the bedrock. And in a lot of cases, it's the toxins that they're putting into the ground because they have to get rid of them somewhere. So they store them somewhere, and then these wells crack, and it goes into the bedrock. It can get into the groundwater, and it's causing all these earthquakes, and we certainly don't want that to continue.
No, it's extremely important that we consider our environment, and especially these Great Lakes.
I know. Yes. Yeah. And there have been so many issues really related to water in the last couple of years in Michigan, and it seems like everywhere I go, I'm surrounded by it. because we have the whole issue with Flint and the lead in the water, which everybody is aware of. And even before it was really determined that they were going to say, yes, this is a huge issue, back in June, let me head back. Back in June, we had a hearing, a water hearing. It was in Lansing at the Capitol, and it was set up by Representative Stephanie Chang, who's from Detroit. She represents Detroit and Ecorse, and another city, which I'm not thinking of at the moment. And she had all these people that were having issues with water. So it wasn't just the Flint people, it was people from Detroit who were suffering from shutoffs, people from Highland Park, the same thing, whether that was because they weren't paying their bill or because they weren't getting bills. In a lot of cases, it was because they weren't getting bills. There was a woman from Highland Park, she was like 86 years old. She got a bill for, I want to say $20,000.
Wow.
Now, how does an 86-year-old use that much water?
Right.
You know, she's probably not using that much water. But at the same time, these Flint people were there. And I remember a woman testifying that her son's blood level was through the roof. And these children couldn't bathe, they couldn't brush their teeth because they had all this brown water. You know, so we knew it was out there. We knew it was happening, that there was a huge issue in Flint, but it wasn't being recognized by the DEQ or the EPA at that point. So we sat down, there were 6 of us representatives that were on that committee, and we were just mortified at the stories that we heard. So we sat down and we wrote 10 bills. And I have 2 of those bills. In one bill, it's the Water is a Human Right bill, meaning everyone should have access to clean, safe, affordable water. Now, does that bill have teeth behind it? Can you enforce that? Probably not so much the way the bill is written, but I mean, isn't that something that you would think is a human right? I mean, you can't live without water.
It's like air.
It's like air,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, one of the things that so kind of surprised me is that the damage that does, particularly to a young person.
Yes.
In the testimony you heard, is this reversible, or are these young people damaged for life?
No, it is not reversible. If they had caught it immediately, there are chelating agents or chemicals that they can give to a child that will help to remove the lead from that child's body. But because this is kind of all after the fact, is particularly these children, because it started so early on in the whole crisis, all they can do is they can make sure that they get really good nutrition, so that the lead is not leaching out of the bones or the brain or whatnot and affecting the body. Good nutrition, make sure that when they get to school, that they are getting the wraparound services, so that what they're afraid of is it can cause cognitive and behavioral issues, and that needs to be addressed right away, so that they are getting help from school nurses, from school psychologists, special ed services. They need to have all of that. And it's really a case where they don't know if it's going to affect every child or not. And that's a wait and see kind of situation, but definitely good nutrition right from the get-go.
So this could be the Michigan family might all have to deal with this for the next 50, 60, however long these people live.
Yes.
Because it just may not allow them to have the same opportunities that a regular kid could have. One thing I was going to mention is that there are older pipes in some of these urban areas. It's not unusual, and that was the general trend, I think, in the 20s and 30s, was these lead pipes. So my guess is that they probably exist in almost all old urban areas.
Yeah.
And while in Dearborn Heights, we have had a water mainline replacement program, but part of that motivation was older pipes tend to crack open and water lossage.
Sure.
Someone, an auditor once told me, who audited Highland Park, that he said for every gallon that Highland Park purchases from the Detroit system and transmit to the to a household, they lose 50% of it through leakage in the old pipes.
Right.
And so they're incurring a lot more. For instance, in Dearborn Heights, we get really concerned when we get above 8-10%, but some of it's used for fire when the fire department fights a fire.
Oh, true.
And there are other times that the city uses water, and so that's and you lose some in the transmission. But I can't imagine for every gallon you buy.
Isn't that terrible?
And then the way the system's set up for sewage disposal, a lot of the formulas work on how much water you buy. So you get a double whammy that you're also paying the Detroit sewage system or whatever system you're in the downriver, a fee based on, and the logic is we don't meter how much goes out of a house, how much goes out of a city, but it ought to be somewhat relevant to the amount of water a person purchases. So that's the logic.
Sure.
And so it costs Highland Park a lot of money.
Well, I was at the Conference of Western Wayne about a week ago, and there was a gentleman there talking about water leaks, and he was talking about
that's right.
the city over that had an issue with a leak, and it was a huge amount of water. You can't even imagine that much water could be lost, and the city's paying for all that water. So.
Yeah, we had a leak one time. We had trouble finding, but it was going right into the Rouge River. The line went right near, and we were having difficulty. There are now techniques. In fact,
and that's what he was talking
the
about.
system that he was talking about, we actually purchased about 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
So my men and women in the department can use that, and it's based upon listening to the flow and other things. And when you start, and it's really a nifty thing. I can't describe it, but
very technical. I know that.
It works, and so they're able to find out. And of course, anytime, like I said, we don't ever want to get above 8-10%, but that's how we do it here. Yeah. The other thing was, as part of the Detroit water system, now the Great Lakes, all that infrastructure that went to Flint. So when Flint moved out of the system, it made all of our water bills go up, and that's why Sue McCormick at DWSD really made a good offer. There's so much that I think is eventually going to come out in regards to that, and it's going to be kind of nasty.
And every day, it seems, there's something new that comes out. I just got 2 bleeps on my phone today of stories from the Free Press on Flint issues, and it seems like that's the trend.
Yeah.
Every couple of days, you're getting some more bleeps that, oh, look what we found, look what we found.
The good thing in regards to this system is, as part of the system in Dearborn Heights and the others downriver in the Western Wayne, we are testing the water. We have not, and we do a lot of sampling. We have not found any measurable traces of lead in the system. The Detroit water system is actually a very good system.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and actually I had called Mr. Zimmer from the water department just to see where Dearborn Heights was at, because I was curious. And he said that they never come close. And not only lead, I mean, there are other elements and minerals that should not be at high levels as well. And he said none of them. They've never been close. So
no,
that's encouraging.
And we publish a report every June, which we're required to do. So when we mail the, and probably people looked at it and said, well, I'm not going to spend my time looking at it.
Sure.
But if anybody is interested, I mean, I believe it's every June, and when we send out the city newsletter, we publish it in there, and you can see just how pure the water is that we're all using. But yeah.
And I'm guessing people are going to pay closer attention to that now, because that's the talk, no matter where you go to. Somebody's house, somebody's party, or in the store, people are all talking about, well, I wonder how our lead level is. I wonder how our water is. And
compliments to you, Senator Kniezek, for the water drive that you guys organized. And
well, I have to give kudos to him. He was the one who actually originally started it all, and he asked us all to join in on that, and I could not believe how much water was donated. And in funds as well.
Yes.
So it really was amazing. So
it's nice how the state, and what I find interesting, and just to digress, I guess, for a second, but I have some good friends that live in Toledo, and about 2 years ago, one of them gave me a call and said, can you, when you next time you come to visit, would you buy some bottled water for us, because we're all being told, don't drink the Toledo water because of the algae.
Sure.
And so I remember saying, well, maybe you just need to boil the water. And she said, no, that's the worst thing you can do. It will just multiply.
It concentrates
They love
the
that.
toxin,
So
yes.
you don't want to do that. But when I look back on it now, even though that was a lot of people from the border area, South Michigan, I think Bedford, some of those areas get their water from Toledo, and that was undrinkable. But I remember that when I came down to buy some water, at first I decided, well, I almost forgot, and then I remembered, and I stopped like Home Depot along the way in a southern Detroit suburb, and they said, we're all sold out. We don't know what's going on. So I had to go back and bought the water back in Dearborn Heights at Home Depot, and then took it down. But the inconvenience, but hopefully anybody that was an elected official of any capacity, if someone came in with brown jarred water, you've got to check on that and find out what's going on.
Right, and I know they did say that some of the brown was due to rust because there was rust that was leaking out of pipes, but rust or not, you still check it out.
You do.
You know, if that's your job to control the quality of the water, then that should be your job, and you should be doing that, checking out why. Yeah. Why is that happening, and why at such an extended level? You know, you could see one or two homes maybe, oh, okay, the pipes are old, they haven't used them, but I mean, this was in one area that, I mean, it was neighborhood wide, so yeah, it's a shame that that had to happen.
I think one of the things probably our residents is your background. So where did you grow up, and what's your education?
I grew up in Warren, so I'm an East Sider, as my husband always says. I went to Mott High School.
Okay.
I graduated in '79. There were 721 in my graduating class, so it was a huge school. And at that point, they had junior highs. So the high school was 10th, 11th, and 12th. So it was a huge school. And then I wanted to be a medical technologist because I loved science. So I got my degree in medical technology, and I worked at Beaumont Hospital. And then I also worked a couple summers. I worked one summer at Hudsell Hospital. I worked a summer at St. John Hospital. So I got to experience a lot of the hospital life and see what it was like. And then decided, you know what, I really don't want to work in a hospital anymore. I'm a people person. And I was working in a lab. So as a med tech, you know, the person that comes in with the plunger and they pull blood out of your body. I was the person who had to take that blood and analyze it.
Okay.
So yeah, that was not nice. So I went back to school and I got my teaching certificate. So I went to U of M Dearborn and got certified to teach high school math and science. So I have a major in chemistry and general science and a minor in math. And I taught 13 years. I taught 2 years at the high school and decided that that wasn't really my niche. I like younger kids better, but not too young. So I then got a job working with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. I taught life science and physical science, and I taught algebra, which I love. That's my passion. I love algebra. So I did that, and I did take time off when we have 3 daughters. I took time off when they were little. And then when they started to say to me, Mom, you know, you could get a job at Target if you want, like our friends' moms do, I decided it was time for me to go back to work. So I did teach for quite a while after that. And then just wanted something different. You know, I just knew that it was time. Even though I loved kids, I just knew there needed to be something different for me. I couldn't keep teaching, or I was going to be one of those crabby teachers who burns out. So when I heard that there was an opening for state rep, I decided to throw my hat in the ring and see how that would work out, and I won. So
well, you've done very well, and all of us as constituents are very well served. You've done a very great job up there, so we're very pleased.
I appreciate that.
And for those who don't know, you're married to Judge Mark Plawecki, so our district court judge, and so and I've always felt former state senator David Plawecki and I always felt like he was a brother to me. So I've often felt always real close to the Plawecki family. And it took about 15 years. People would always call me Councilman or Council Chairman Plawecki. So it was just people got it confused.
I can tell you how many times I've been asked, "Are you related to the mayor?"
Yeah, so there's always been that close relationship,
Yes.
so which has politically not been bad at all.
No,
so
no,
that's been a good thing. But
and I wish David were still with us, because he would have
I
been
do too.
a fabulous mentor for me. He just was such
Yes.
a kind, gentle soul that I would have really appreciated him being there for me. But was
when
not to be.
when I went up to Lansing, and he helped me immensely on my campaign. But yeah, the inside stuff that you know, he kind of asked me, what do you want to be? Because there's no book to read in
No.
regards to, you get elected, next thing you know, someone calls you up and says, okay, we're going to vote on a caucus majority leaders and do all the appointments, and you don't even know what's
No.
available,
No.
and all these deals get cut.
Yep.
So, but it is an interesting life. But yeah, he gave me that insight, so I right away asked for appropriation, which was something that I wanted. But so you've had a rather diverse background.
I have, which I think makes me a good rep.
Yes.
Because I have seen the hospital world, and I've seen the world of education, and and I think it helps having kids and having a family. I mean, there are a lot of young reps in there, and that's great to be young because they have all the energy. I wish I had the energy that they have, but I come with experience.
Yeah.
And I think I think it gives you a little different perspective when you're voting on things and you're trying to write bills, because I think you have a better perspective on how it's going to affect certain people or certain groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
So
The other thing that I felt was an advantage when I went up there, I wasn't looking for another job. Like so many of them, you get elected at, let's say if you get elected at 26 or 27, you can't, you're term limited out in 6 to 8 years, depending on what house you're in. And so the last 2 years, they were spending so much of their time looking for a new job. And I thought that was, I'm totally against term limits. And one of the best things I ever heard of, I was at a Michigan Association of CPA meeting, and Skubik was our guest speaker.
Oh, nice.
So he said, how many are for term limits? And most of the CPAs raised their hand. Oh, yeah. So he picked an older gentleman in the front, and he goes, are you a better CPA now, or were you a better CPA 4 years after you came out of school? And the guy goes, wow, 4 years, I didn't know anything.
There
Now
you
I
go.
know how to
Yes.
practice. And he goes, don't you think a legislator works the same way, that as they get more experience, they get better, hopefully?
Well, and the same thing with a doctor. When you pick
Yeah.
out a doctor, do you look for the one that just got out of medical school? No, you're going to look for the one that has a lot of years of experience
Yeah.
and has seen a lot. So I think it's true really of any job, I would say.
Yeah, and so we do it the exact, but I thought Skubik, that was a very, and he was trying to indicate that from his observation of, I don't know, 30, 40 years, that the system is really not working,
Yeah.
and it used to work better before
Right.
term limits, but I thought that was interesting.
Well, and to go along with that, they say that the lobbyists are the ones who run Lansing, because they've been around so long. They know all the issues, they know all the players, and every couple of years they're trying to orient new
Yep.
reps and senators, because they're new to the system. They don't know the people, they don't know the issues, and so I think it's true what they say. They kind of are running it to a certain extent, but I mean, I do rely on them.
Sure,
You know,
we all
because
did.
they know
yeah.
all the issues. You know, so.
Representative, it's been so great to have you as a guest.
Nice to
I
be
think
here.
that the people of Dearborn Heights can adequately tell that we are very well represented by you, and
Thank you.
keep up the good work.
Will do.
And thank you for being a guest on the Mayor Dan Paletko Show, and thank you viewers for watching another edition of the Mayor Dan Paletko Show.